overall anxiety socially.
Yeah.
When I was like, yes, you got to experience it for a bit. Just like you got to have a go at the torture.
I can't believe that made him feel insecure.
So he said he felt uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So he was like, for the first time in
uncomfortable.
his life, he was sat there going like, is this in the right place? Like, is this right? What am I doing with my hands? And I was like, welcome to my typical night out.
Chris just in a quiet room with his mate.
Yeah. Like I've seen him in some particularly social environments having no problems. Probably wearing close to nothing or nothing.
Nothing.
Or at least showing pictures of himself wearing nothing. And he comes and sits with his best mate in the room
with a camera on.
And loses it. So that made me feel pretty good. So anyway, shout out to Chris.
Shout out to Chris. Oh, that's exceptional. That's a great way to start. I'm going to have to get him back in just to watch him squirm in his seat.
It makes me feel a little bit better about the movements I'm probably going to be doing whilst we go through this.
Well, that's why we've got the chairs that just go from side to side so you can just...
do an anxiety swivel.
Yeah, that's what I do.
Nice.
If you watch a lot of the clips, everybody's just doing this. Yeah, just so we don't... It's quite intimate. So
it is when I've got you in the ears like this.
I know, it's nice, isn't it? A little bit of ASMR. Yeah. Well, welcome, mate.
Thank you, mate. Been a long time coming.
It has been a long time coming. You were top two of my first guest that I had in mind, and
I'm now number 50.
25. You and Juan. But we got there after a little bit of peer pressure on here. Did you hear any of the peer pressure? No?
I got some from Danny.
Danny, yeah. She's back on this week, actually. So, as we said, or you saw like the little bit of the brief.
You gave me a little bit of instruction.
Yeah. The podcast the goal of the podcast is to have a free-flowing and fun conversation about bikes, and then that's pretty much it.
So let's do it.
So, we have Rob Nee, MTB, on today.
The name changes are fast approaching, I think.
Oh, mate, you have to do it. You have to do it. It's official now. Well, this is actually not going to be out for a while, so you can delay it.
That's it. But by the time that this comes out, I may be
Rob Nee, MTB. You have to do it. I'm surprised that you don't have your medals.
Yeah.
You should have brought it in. That would have been fun.
I actually forgot it. That would have been good.
Yeah, you can't wear a medal after getting a 9th.
I know. I mean, look, I won the age category.
Yeah, cool.
So
how many was that in that?
20 in that. I think 17 in elite. But
Decent.
Like I've said to you before, the way that they'd split them up, it makes it hard.
Yeah.
Because you are choosing to go into either elite or into your age category.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm of the opinion that the vast majority of people who are racing elite should be in their age category.
Yeah.
People get pushed into elite by ego and because it's what most other people do.
Yeah.
So then by default, if you want a competitive race, most of the time people go into elite.
Yeah.
But oftentimes they're not beating the top 3 in their age category. So it's a bit mixed up. So it's almost like to a lot of people, it would be an insignificant feat to do well in your age category, in the 19 plus age category. For some reason, all of the other ones, that doesn't apply.
Yeah.
But if you're in 19 plus and 19 to 30,
yeah,
it's like, well, you should be, elite is where it's at.
Yeah.
And if you're not in there, it's like, oh, whatever.
Yeah.
So point being is I would have won the age category.
Mm-hmm.
But I think even without a big crash on the day, and like if I had my best performance, I think top 5 would have been like something to fucking celebrate on that day.
Yeah.
Like not on all the elite races that like I've been in and what I've seen at, but the standard that day was very high.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting way of setting up. I don't know if it's because the sport itself is a little bit grassroots.
Yeah, true.
But yeah,
I guess in a flow race as well too, you could probably just jump in on any one of them. Yeah. In terms of you can have people probably in the elite that wouldn't normally be anywhere near the elite on something like a Rimba with.
Yeah, but the problem is you could sign up for your first race and race elite.
Yeah.
Like there's no one there to say, hey, like here's the reasons why you shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
So as soon as people tick over from under 19s or whatever it is, so if they go from under 19s into 19 plus, it's almost like the viewpoint is if you're a pretty good rider, you should be elite.
Yeah, okay.
And then it's like all it takes is for two, like for example, this weekend, you got 2 to 3 world-class riders, so 2 world-class, 1 national rider, and that obviously they're in the top 3.
Yeah.
So it's like really, it's like the kind of people who like myself who are like good riders, but it's still a hobby.
Yeah.
It's like, I think really we should almost be battling it out for our age group.
Yeah.
If it was to be split where genuine elite riders are in elite, but again, it's a hard thing to manage when there's probably a lot of inconsistencies around the turnouts to events too.
Yeah, true.
Because there's probably going to be a lot where you don't get, national world-class level riders there. Yeah. And in that case, then there should also be a split between the real shredders and the people who are just there for a bit of fun.
Surely they'd be able to do something on Strava, like with certain run times or something like that, couldn't they?
You'd think so. Again,
it would be hard
it's
to
just
set
admin.
Up. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's your choice, right? It's like, do you want to go, like, you can judge it based on what's happened in the past, and it's your choice. It's like, what's more important to you? Is winning a medal or getting on a podium? Is that the most important? If that's what it is most important to you, then it's like, sweet, you might want to go in your age group if that's not possible for elite.
Yeah.
Whereas to me, like, I've set the goal for myself over the next 2-3 years, at least I think for the state round, based on the standard I've seen this year, I'd like to get a podium for the state series in elite.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm pretty much just going to race there because I've had a few podiums now, I would have in my age category. So I'm like, sweet, I think
you don't need to go
pretty much every race I've done, I would have won that.
Yeah.
So it's like, cool, that's done. Now it's trying to set my standards a little bit higher and kind of put myself in the same boat as the elite guys.
Yeah.
And kind of work towards that. So that's what's important to me. So I would take, top 10s in elites over podiums in the lower category, from now moving forward.
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny because if you ask me, I don't know, when did I do my first race 3 months ago?
Fuck, not even.
Like a couple months
6 weeks ago.
I was nervous as to whether or not I should be racing in any category. I was only going off Strava times.
Yeah.
I was like, I think I'm all right.
Yeah.
Like, I know that I'm normally the quickest out of people I ride with, but I could be terrible.
Yeah.
Is my fitness going to be enough? I have no idea. So it's like, I was laughing to myself on the way back from the race on the weekend when I was like, okay, 9th out of 17, I was like, that's really good, but, could be in the top 5. That would have been better, obviously.
Yeah.
But then I was like, fuck, you didn't even know if you should be racing a few months ago. I was like, put things in perspective, it's pretty good.
Yeah, fuck, man. It's really, really cool. And you were top 5 at Arimba the first round, yeah? Yeah,
which is to me, that's like the most significant achievement so far. Like, this weekend was really cool in terms of the placings were so tight that I was 0.8 seconds, I think, off 8th.
Yeah.
And I was less than 15 seconds off top 5. So that's a couple of mistakes and local lines.
Yeah.
That,
on what, a 15-minute total?
So my total was 12 and a half minutes. So for people who don't know, enduro racing is your total time across 3 or 4 stages. So you ride up untimed and you race down timed, but it's your total of your fastest times across each of those stages. So, each stage roughly 3 to 5, 6 minutes, and that gets put together. So total race time, I think for me was just over 12 minutes, and there was less than a minute and a half between the first rider, who's a World Cup racer, and the last rider in elite. That's how tight things were. So it's like if I didn't fall off and hurt myself, that's like the significant time to be made on almost anywhere. So
it's like 10 to 15 seconds per run, you're only off one of the best riders.
100%. Yeah, literally.
Mental.
Yeah, that's right. And it's like, and the most exciting thing for me is I can see those opportunities.
Yeah.
Like, I could tell you multiple times where if I had done something better, I would have got faster. I'm not scratching my head going, how have they done that?
Yeah.
I'm going, I know I can do that.
Yeah.
With time and practice.
Yeah.
Which is for me, it's like being when I first started training again. It's exciting to be fuck, I could be, if I just did that, if I improve my cornering, if I do this, if I don't fall off my bike,
And it's such a fucking cool sport.
The best.
Yeah. Bikes in general, racing like that, motocross, downhill, whatever it might be, it's so fucking cool to see it's almost infinite how much better someone could get on, you know, you double that roller into that corner and you catch up like a half a second or whatever it might be. Obviously, I can't do it anywhere near the level that you can, but seeing how that you can put a run together and it'd be like, that's another 3 or 4 seconds there. And that's probably what the pro does. And that's why he's 5 seconds ahead of you on that line.
100%.
But it's not that you couldn't do that. It's just that the way that like their mind works on a run, just fucking ridiculous. Like you showed us that, what's your boy, Jack Muir? Yeah. Like where he's doubling rollers that you don't even think to double. And he's just not slowing down because he's getting air off that.
100%.
You know, and
that was one of the things that that's actually one of that's probably the biggest thing that separates me from being like in like the top of the like, at least obviously there's a fair few things, but like in terms of like probably one of the most significant things is like being able to like how you view a trail. Like I think until I'd been exposed to how some of these people ride, I was like, I think up until about now, and I think now I'm starting to make that transition a bit more, is I would ride like an intermediate but fast. And now it's like, okay, how do I ride like an advanced rider? Because it is different. And the way that they're reading the trails, they're not even doing corners that you're doing, right? They're not touching sections of the track that you're going over. And you hadn't even thought it was possible to get it over in the way that they've done it.
Yeah.
And to be able to read that on the fly, the way they do, is probably the most significant difference. Is like if you're just a good rider who rides the trail, you kind of ride the trail as it's mapped out in front of you. Whereas they're looking at it in a completely different way. They're looking at lines over here that you haven't even clocked. You haven't seen that. And then you see a video of them doing it. You're like, I didn't even think about going that way. So that's cool.
And particularly with like some of the terrain that you ride over as well, it doesn't look like you can ride a bike down some of it in the first place.
I know.
And then, well, half of they don't. They just skip clean over the top of it. Like, why would I touch those rocks when I can just launch it for 5 meters and not even touch that?
That's the thing. Like, and so when people say like, how are you comfortable going over that so fast? It's like, well, the thing is, speed is your friend there.
Yeah.
Like some of the most uncomfortable terrain you go on, like the faster you go, the better it feels. Obviously, that's not advice to someone who's not confident in doing that.
You need to be able to hold onto the bike first.
Yeah. And if you like, but like you know, to skip over things, you don't want to be slowing down on it.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy. Like thinking about the 1 or 2 times we first went out to Mill Creek and like even that big rock roll down at the bottom of Methane Alley, where just like I thought you couldn't ride a bike down it. And then you're like, no, watch this YouTube video, and he just sends it down there. And even just something like that, looking at it initially, and I don't go down it anywhere near as fast as you do, but it's cool to see what you can do. And then even like that one just up from that where you jump sort of into and over that rock garden on Methane Alley. Yeah. I remember you saying it to me, like just skip straight off the top of that. And I was like, you can't do that. And then you do it and you're like, oh, it's actually so much better when you go faster because now you just clear that and blow through it.
100%.
Yeah.
I think that's actually one of the things that I've found has been most, what's the word? That's kind of like grabbed me into the sport. And it has been the amount of moments where I've gone like, you can't do that like that.
Yeah.
And then you do it like that. And the amount of times that that's happened has just been like, it's infinite.
Yeah.
Like it's literally infinite to how much you can develop your skill, your fitness, all these things. And similar to like, you know, on the weekend, the last 2 races I've done, I've been perceivingly completely spent. Like I've stated I'm done, I can't do any more. And then I've gone back and like after 10 minutes gone, but you might as well give it a try.
Yeah.
And I've taken time off that same run that I did earlier.
Yeah.
Fresh. It's like, there's always just another level. And it's like, for me, I guess with training, as we know, things start to slow down.
Yeah.
Your results after time.
And it never gets anywhere near that cool.
That's I mean, bench presses are cool and deadlifts are cool, but
you just can't get that excited about training like you can riding a bike, I don't think. It's not that exciting.
Not once, like, especially not once you've hit the. I think as soon as like training started to become less like exciting for me, and that's not to say that it's not exciting, because I actually like. I need to be careful the way I kind of like frame this, because I still love training so much, but it's not like the kind of G up around like training. Isn't it? Once you've got to the point where like you would define yourself as like, if your goal is strength, let's say, or physique, that you are strong, and you've ticked off some of those boxes. Like, you know, for me it was like 250 deadlift, fuck yeah. 140 bench press, amazing. Still kind of working on that squat. But that's I'll blame the quad injury on that, but like, I'll come back to that one. But like,
the problem with that is you didn't have 4 blues on there.
Yeah,
you would have smoked it if you got 4 blues on there, but it was 3 reds and a black. That's not how you describe it.
I just need to learn low bar, and I'll come back and smoke it.
Yeah, true.
But like, I think once you've, and like, for me, it was like I've got what I would define as strong, and I think I can maintain very close to that most of the time with a significantly less amount of training.
Yeah.
So I still walk around with that kind of badge that I give myself as like, you're reasonably strong. That's good.
Yeah. What'd you pull 210 the other day on deads?
Yeah, like no problem without having done much
racing on the weekend.
Yeah. And have got in what I would consider to be good shape.
Yeah.
Like, nice and lean, decent, like amount of muscle. I'd look at the photo and go, nice, I did that.
Yeah.
Like once you've done those things, it's like, sweet. Well, if I could push harder, but what's going to happen is I'm going to get that photo with a bit more muscle.
Yeah.
And maybe a bit less fat. And I'm going to get that deadlift with another 20 kilo on the bar. It's like, once you've kind of got the thing, it's like, I want to be strong. Once you've got that kind of identity, it's kind of like, sweet, well, what are we doing this for now?
Yeah.
And of course, once the like kind of cost to benefit starts, or like the return on investment starts to reduce over time, because you need to start doing more and more to get less and less. And this is where people who are like die hard for like either like bodybuilding and powerlifting and things like that would massively disagree. But like at some point it starts becoming worth it, because it's like, what's it actually adding to your life?
Yeah.
But like it does actually start taking away more, and you need to make more sacrifices. And for the people who want that, like, that's amazing. But when you go back to what you actually wanted when you first started training, living in the gym and being like regimented with your training, that's not what I actually dreamed of.
Yeah.
I was like, I want to be jacked, I want to be strong, I want to feel good,
and ride a bike.
And when I was younger, I want to ride a bike. So now I'm coming back to do that part. But jacked.
Yeah. And with more money, so you can buy a better bike.
Exactly right.
Which is the meaning of life.
Yeah.
That's the thing, and like I spoke about it. We've spoken about it before. That's why it's so important to have hobbies outside of the gym that allow you to do those things that are actually fun, and they're also active as well too. If you were to never step foot in the gym for the rest of your life, but you continue to ride your bike, you will lose some muscle mass, but you're going to stay, for the most part, in decent shape as long as you stay on the bike, and you'll be decently strong. You'll have, you'll make you happier, and you can probably bring down the intensity of riding, but you can still do that for a long period of time if you don't stop doing that. You can do it with weight training as well, but it's just so much more exciting than just lifting weights, which lifting weights is cool as well, but it's just not riding bikes.
Yeah, 100%.
Like you can talk about riding bikes for fucking hours.
I can, for sure.
And get excited about it. Like I was telling you, Clint and I saw each other for the first time in like a year and a bit or 2 years in the foyer, and we spoke about like Supercross and downhill for like an hour. Just and we were both just gassed up talking about it. It
was actually I was thinking this the other day when I was out, and most people who know me know that like not quiet, but like keep myself to myself a fair bit just by nature. Probably a little bit of an introvert.
You haven't fucking stopped talking yet, mate, so they wouldn't get that.
Because we're talking about bikes.
That was the point.
Yeah. So, but like when I was out, like riding in at some of the competitions, it's like, I'm here, I'm chatting to this person, I'm going up to this person. It's like in almost any other context, you will not see that happen from me.
Yeah.
But in this, like in that context, for some reason, here we go, straight into it.
Yeah. Such a cool environment just to see, like when we went and watch a race, just the amount of cool bikes there, and the amount of people just from all different levels having a crack at sending it.
I think that's one of my favorite parts about it is the encouragement and support and the general just like G up that everyone has for anyone who's given it a crack.
Yeah.
But it's also what I do like about, when we've done the challenges in the past, like at Fitness Playground or One Playground now, like it doesn't matter what you're lifting or what the output is on the ski erg or whatever the thing is that you're doing. I just want to see you go so hard. Like, I want to see you push yourself to the limit, or I want to see you try the thing, back to the context of like riding that you thought you couldn't do, or like, give it hell, lift the extra 10 kilos on the deadlift. Like any environment like that, I love.
Yeah.
I love seeing it. I love being in it. I love being encouraged, and I like encouraging it.
Yeah.
And I think it almost, like, riding in competition has replicated that on like on a weekly basis now, which is fantastic.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Just seeing people put in effort, it's so cool. And it's like when we went to the powerlifting comp as well. You see people from all different levels. Doesn't matter what, I think the first squat of the day was like 25 kilos, but everybody still cheered.
Let's go.
And then the biggest deadlift of the day was fucking 295 kilos. Obviously, everybody cheered a little bit more for that. But
the thing is, it was comparable.
Yeah.
Like in terms of like the G up for that person's first lift, shaking on the platform, nervous as hell, was just as exciting for most people as that big one on the day. Obviously, because it's a big weight that everyone's like, is this person really going to lift that? Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But in terms of for the support, it was the same.
Yeah.
And that's actually another thing as well, is similar to riding. I was so impressed by that environment out there too for the first comp.
Yeah.
Like it was a friendly environment, like supportive. It didn't matter who you were. No one was too good for anyone else.
No.
It was just it was fantastic, and from start to finish, every single person was involved, interested, and just giving that support, which is great.
Yeah, it's never going to be a bad day out in the trails with bikes. It's unless you fuck yourself up.
Yeah.
Then what else are we going to talk about, mate? The goal is to get a little bit of backstory about you and kind of what you do, why you do it, which is kind of leads into it there. Like, you obviously get excited about people putting in effort, people improving, people just having their best crack. So what got you into personal training?
I'm trying to think where I start now. So, relatively not interested in things at school. Like not interested, but the way that the school curriculum was set up was not particularly great for me.
Yeah.
Kind of coasted through. I was always smart enough to get by.
Yeah.
I would never be at the bottom of the class. I never felt like I needed to try that hard. Like, I'd get my C's and my B's I knew exactly what I needed to do for it to not cause a problem.
Yeah.
And for the rest of the time, I was relatively disruptive, to the point where I was politely asked to kind of leave the school. But like, I wasn't expelled, but there was conversations had with my parents for them, and they're like, do you think that this is good? Is this a good thing that's going on here? Have you considered your other options?
Yeah.
We went, and then I had to come back a year later with my tail between my legs because I was having to get up at the time, I think at, before 6 a.m. for a school kid, nightmare, freezing cold on the bus. I was like, I can't do this for, I think I was in year 8 then. We go to year 12 in school before you go to college.
Yeah.
I was like, I can't, I'm staring down the barrel of doing this. I was like, I hate it. I can't do it. So I had to go back, apologize, and say, look, I'm going to be better now. I wasn't. For about 2 years, I was still a bit of a shit. And then I kind of turned it around, got myself into college. I did a sports diploma, which is pretty dropout.
Yeah.
Got to the end of that. And at that point, I was fairly certain. I was like, I think I want to do something physical. I'll probably do something like laboring or building, which is what I was doing kind of on the side of that for little jobs here and there. And then someone told me that you can do a strength and conditioning degree with your course. I was like, what's that? They're like, the gym. I was like, fuck yeah.
Right.
I was like, I can do a course on the gym.
Yeah.
I was like,
that's what they should just call it, the course on the gym.
Yeah, sign me up.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, sweet. So I called them up. I was like, hey, you need these grades. I've got these ones, significantly lower. I was like, can you accept me in? And they said, obviously, no. So thankfully, in the course that I'm doing, you can redo your work.
Okay, yeah.
So I went to, shout out Meg Wignall, who I went to college with. I basically copied all of her work and spent about 3 months in the library just completely plagiarizing her work to get me the grades I needed.
That's resourceful, mate.
100%. Work smart, not hard.
What you do in the real world.
Yeah. Don't waste any time.
Yeah, fuck that. They use ChatGPT now, so...
There you go, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Did that, got into uni, 3 years of uni, actually switched on then. I set myself the goal in the first year. It was the first time I'd ever really been I was motivated for some kind of academic work. I was like, this is cool. I was like, I can do this. I was like, I'm super interested in this. I'd love to learn more about, sports, strength and conditioning. I was like, maybe I'll go and work with a rugby team or whatever it may be, because I played rugby at the time. I was like, but I'd love to give this a crack. I was like, what's the best result you can get first? I was like, well, I want that. I was like, whatever. Like, I was like, my sister got it. So I was like, I can do it.
Yeah.
Whatever. Let's give that a crack. My work ethic didn't reflect that in the first year because I don't know if this applies over here. In your first year of university in the UK, your first year doesn't count towards your grades. So it's almost like a warm-up. So you go and pay £9,000 to
get
pissed, and as long as you just need to pass it. So like it was a running joke. It was like first year don't count. It's like, oh, sweet, first year doesn't count, amazing. But the problem is then I got to the second year and I didn't really know how to do any of the work.
So the first year kind of counted.
So the first year kind of counts because it's setting you up to reference properly, set your work out, write in a certain way. You can't just write, it has to be in the way it's supposed to be, especially if it's a Bachelor of Science degree. So it has to be using the scientific methods and structured in that format. So steep learning curve in year 2, but then I applied myself pretty hard, and in the third year lived in the library when I wasn't living in the nightclubs or the gym in between.
Rob hates sleep. That's probably where it started.
Yeah, not much sleep that year. And then, so finished that off, and that qualified me as personal training. And I think at that point I was like, cool, I want to do PT. I decided that, kind of going to skip over the story of coming to Australia because that is a long one. But
that's just a natural progression. Born in England, becomes PT, Australia.
Pretty much. And even take that even further.
Bondi.
Yeah, Bondi. Australian girlfriend, permanent residency, which I got on Saturday.
Oh yeah, congratulations, mate.
Newest permanent resident to Australia.
Excellent. We need more English here.
Yeah, more English personal trainers.
Yeah. I say that as a joke just about to every English PT I have on here, which is all of them. And some of them are like, what do you mean? Like, as a, like, oh, you become a English PT in Australia, how original. And they're like, what?
Yeah.
Heaps of it. Yeah, I know. That's the joke.
Yeah.
We've got too many of you.
There's a few.
Yeah.
Which is why it was actually quite difficult to try and get a sponsorship for PT. Because I spoke to the immigration lawyer when I came over here. So I'd maxed out my working holiday visas, student visas. I was like, I've probably got a year at this point. I was like, but my life is very much set here. Yeah. I was like, it's going to be...
Don't want to disrupt that.
Don't want to disrupt that. I don't want to go home.
No.
And he was like, cool, so what are your qualifications? What do you do? And I basically told him that I am a personal trainer. He was like, do you have a girlfriend? And I was like, well, it's early doors. I was like, I don't know if I would, early days. I was like, I don't know if I would say girlfriend. I was like, but there's a female, in the situation right now that could potentially be moving in that direction.
You did tell me after the first date that she was your girlfriend.
I don't know, there we go. So, that's keen. I didn't tell her that.
I told her the other day.
Did you? You're supposed to keep me looking cool, mate.
You were not cool when you come up and said it to me.
No. Let's be honest, I've never been very cool. So, yeah, found out that my qualifications were that. He's like, do you have a girlfriend? I was like, yeah. He's like, that's your option. He's like, I would pursue that. He goes, he's like, I'm not going to allow you to do any more paid stuff with me. He goes, I don't have advice for you apart from that. I was like, sweet, well, thanks for being honest. So there we go. That's what kept me here. Started working at Fitness Playground at the time through Dave Marsh, who kind of got me in.
Oh, yeah, really? How did that happen?
So I don't know if he even knew, but I was training one of his clients in lockdown, but he was still training with the client. So I don't. But the reason I'm laughing about it is because it wasn't an issue. I don't know if that's ever even been talked about.
Yeah.
So anyway, sorry, Dave. I kind of was stealing your clients, but I wasn't. But he was a friend of my housemate who I was training. And basically, Dave probably would have been charging something like $80 to $100 per session.
Yeah.
I was charging $25. So I think what probably happened was my mate was like, I'm doing PT. It's $25 because obviously I was doing it in the park in lockdown, and I'd never really done PT up before then.
Yeah.
So I was just like, please just give me money.
Yeah.
So he was probably like, well, it's basically free.
Yeah.
I'll come and do it. So I know it was no kind of discredit to Dave.
Yeah.
It was, well, there's nothing else to do in lockdown, so I might as well go see Rob at the park for a workout.
And I have a spare $25.
Yeah. So he then linked me through Dave.
Right.
I'll have to chat to him about this because it's quite a funny story. I might have told him, I don't know. And then, so I got the interview, got that all set up, and here we go. That's now me. That's my story, and then been there kind of ever since.
Matt Duncan is fond of another English PT.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. So that's how you got into PT, and so like you've got an interesting, or not necessarily an interesting take on what you do with your clients, but you know, something that you said the other day on your intake, you know, something you pride yourself on is getting people really, really good results, you know, and not having to sacrifice tons of stuff in their life and, you know, managing training in and around life.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit more about what you know, the things you focus on with your clients and how do you get them results?
Yeah, sweet. So I think what you were talking about there was, I said like helping people get their results year round.
Yeah.
Because the thing that my clients, or like, I would say my niche, are the people who I end up like working with the most, are their issue tends to be they can get decent results, but they can't keep them.
Yeah.
And for me, it's usually just a very, very simple reason is that they're completely rigid in their approach.
Mm-hmm.
So they overshoot with their commitment. Mm-hmm. So when they haven't been training for a while, because they generally go through a cycle of like completely on or completely off, or like an all or nothing approach, which is what, like, you know, the term we use. And they'll be completely on, training 6 days a week. Their macros are perfect. They're everything. They're not going out. They don't touch alcohol, all these things. And they can maintain that for maybe a short period of time where there's a decent bit of kind of external motivation, holiday, you know, summer's coming, whatever it may be. And then they max that out, or any significant change in their routine, lifestyle, work, stress, whatever, like occurs. And then they can no longer maintain maybe just a small fraction of that commitment, and the whole thing goes out the window. Mm. So I think most of my time is spent helping people manage, well, what can you do in that situation? Because for the vast majority of the time, it's like you could have done 90% of what you had initially committed to, but you let that 10% throw off the rest of it. Mm. And I find that people generally think they need so much more than they really do to get results. And it's usually because they've got okay results by doing loads for a short period of time. It's like, have you tried doing a little bit less for a long period of time?
Yeah.
And let that compound over, you know, like literally years, 10 years.
Yeah.
Like, you know, let it compound over a long period of time. It's like, have you tried that? And then when we start working into that, to looking at people's, like, their schedules and their commitments and the other things that are important to them, which is like probably a key there. It's like, you know, factor in the things that are going to influence and impact your schedule, your ability to commit to your training and your nutrition and all those things. It's like, what are the things that are likely, if we set you a plan that you can do most of the time, it's like, what are the things that are going to come in and interfere with that? And don't treat those things as negative, because some of them you might want to be around. It's like, well, there's going to be some dinners out with friends. It's like, well, we don't want to try and get rid of them. You want them.
Yeah.
But we need to understand that that is going to have a impact that may set you back a little bit, if it, like, in comparison to if you didn't do that. But is that actually the life that you want to live? Mm-hmm. So when we start talking about like a realistic approach and also a dynamic approach that allows for those things to happen, and we have a plan in place that allows you to push hard when you've got an open free schedule, and you know you've got the time, energy, and motivation to kind of like crack on with it, but then also understand that we can drop that down when things get in the way, and you know go back to what we call like a minimum viable program, or like the minimum amount that you need to at least just maintain your progress. And then when, you know, whatever it is has kind of cleared up, you got the time, energy, motivation to go again, we push back up.
Yeah.
And not seeing that as going off plan, because that is the plan.
Yeah.
Because we're ready for that. We knew what things were going to come up. Sometimes there's going to be some unexpected things, but that's cool too. But the plan was, we're going to do this until we can't, then we'll do that, and then we'll go back up.
Yeah.
And it's like, play that game for 5 to 10 years in comparison to the person who goes all or nothing. It's like, you're going to win every time.
Yeah. And that'll give you, a lot of people, that will give you the flexibility that most people want with what they want to achieve. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Is like, do you know what has been the easiest sell for me? Like when I'm talking for a client, say, so we've gone through the consultation, I've told them about how things work, what they want help with. And when I explain that that's how things work, I see them go, oh, thank you, thank God.
Yeah.
And I go, like, what do you mean? You go, well, the last trainer I was with was so like rigid and regimented with all these things, and I just couldn't keep up with it. And I was like, wow, that's such an easy sell. Like, just to allow you to have some flexibility in your approach is like, to think that that's a significant selling point. I'm like, my job's quite easy.
Yeah.
You know, when you think about it like that.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And like, the more people understand about, you know, the things that they actually need to do and what you can actually do to maintain results or even get results as well too, it gives you the flexibility to go out and have dinner, and also that dinner not be something that derails the whole fucking show. It could be something that it not necessarily creates more progress, but it doesn't have to be something that takes away from it.
Yeah,
like if you have a good understanding of nutrition, then you can go out and have a dinner and not stress about it and it be completely fine, and then go to the gym the next day. Or if you understand that you probably only need, you know, 3 sessions a week to maintain, if in some cases get results. And if you know that the sessions that you're doing, you're actually doing good stuff in them, you can then do that for a long period of time as well too. Because it's not like you stack up the things that someone actually needs to do to get results. Go to the gym 3 to 4 times a week, do some steps, eat decent calories consistently. And then the more you understand about the nutrition side of it, of like, if you actually understand macros a little bit, understand calories a little bit, it's not rocket science, hey?
It's very simple.
It's very, very simple. But obviously the reason why it's complex is because, you know, we wouldn't have a job if there wasn't complexities in it.
That's what the thing that I explain to my clients a lot is, the principles are simple, but the application is complicated or complex.
Yeah.
That's the hard bit.
Yeah.
And so I spend a decent period of time with my clients educating them on the principles.
Yeah.
So actually understand not only like kind of like what we're doing, why we're doing it, but it's like, what's the underlying principle? Like, what are we trying to impact here? That's deeper than just the kind of like the surface level, you know, we're training your chest here. It's like, okay, sweet, but what's going on in terms of that? And like, how does muscle growth work? How does fat loss work? How do all of these things work from like a principle-based approach? Once you are armed with that knowledge, you can go out on your own and make so many of these decisions knowing that, okay, sweet, well, maybe I can't do that, but all I know that all I'm trying to achieve is X principle. What could I do that will kind of get me that result to, you know, the minimum amount that I need? Sweet. And I think if you if you're armed with the knowledge of the principles of how the main things work, that becomes so much easier, and your confidence in your ability to kind of go at things on your own and make those kind of dynamic decisions and change your plan on the fly makes it's so much easier. And then you don't get those all or nothing moments where you're like, well, I couldn't do the plan, so what's the point? Diet starts Monday, even though it's a Tuesday.
Yeah.
You know? Because you understand that you can just make a few tweaks here and there and kind of still get what you're looking for.
Yeah. So what are some of the things where you see the clients that you work with, where do they struggle in terms of obviously, you know, doing it for a longer period of time, but what are some of those principles that you try to instill with your clients?
But when it comes to training intensity, but then also, so obviously everyone talks about progressive overload, right? So like, I feel like everyone, if you follow Lane Norton, you follow any like science-based, you know, training information on the internet, you're going to hear progressive overload, which is you need to be adding weight or reps to the bar every single week. I think so many people get caught on that and they chase the numbers on paper. But we need to come back. So, okay, but what are we actually trying to achieve? It's like progressive overload is a result of the adaptation, not the thing that causes it in a certain way, because you got stronger because you adapted from the session that you did last week. So it's it coming to fruition as opposed to the thing that you're actually looking for. Yeah. Does that make, like, do you understand? So when you explain, but what we're actually looking for is tension on the muscle for a decent range of motion. That's actually what we're trying to do. And then when you do that, you're going to adapt, and that means you'll end up lifting more in the next sessions to come. But this is going to be hard because I can go on a rabbit hole here. But
you're welcome.
So when you understand that, and then understand that once you've been training for more than a few months, exposing yourself to that stimulus, so let's say enough stimulus that you have stimulated some adaptation, so you're going to grow muscle and get stronger, that might not have been enough to come to one more rep the next week. But if you're going by the progressive overload, like kind of scheme, well, I need to add a rep every single week, you may feel like you've made no progress. But in reality, it might take 3 to 5 dosages of that same kind of stimulus. So like, let's say the same workout, for that to then amount to you getting enough of a result that you see 1 rep come in your next workout or add 2-3 kilos. So I guess the point being is like, understand what you're actually trying to achieve with that. And I think, yeah, like in the case of training, it's like looking at those like full range of motion, applying tension to the muscle, so lifting things with control, and for the largest range of motion that you can, and then doing that consistently rather than just chasing more numbers. Because you ask what people struggle with, people just chase the numbers and they will sacrifice all of the important parts of training for hypertrophy or gaining muscle or strength in order to do that. But when you flip kind of the way of looking at it there and say, that's just an outcome of doing the right things, do the right things and you'll get that.
Yeah.
That's one of the most important things I've found that has changed the way that my clients train. And it's the one of the things that's got them to actually listen when I say, slow it down, stop cutting the reps short, all of these things, stop adding too much weight to the bar, because once they understand that, it just kind of changes everything. So I guess that's one of the main things that they struggle with that I think we work on pretty early on.
It's the classic, like, slow is smooth is fast.
100%.
You've got to slow it down initially. And I think people, everybody's different, and some people just want to, you see in their personality where they're the person that rushes things.
Yeah.
And, some people will be probably a little bit too slow, but slowing it down and getting like a decent quality of rep across the board. If you can do that in the first couple of weeks, not much else changes from there other than, you continue to progressively overload it and continue to try harder. But if you can there's not anything magic beyond executing a dumbbell press really, really effectively and a row really, really effectively. It's going to get you better results as you go on. It's, I had a client recently ask me, like, do we do like a lot of different exercises as we go on? I'm like, well, not really.
Yeah.
Dumbbell press, incline press is sick. We're going to continue to do that because you're getting stronger on it. And your technique's really, really good. You could probably improve your technique a little bit from there because you do still want to rush out of the bottom position when it gets hard. It's natural, but it's like holding true to that technique. And I said to a client this morning as well, lift as heavy as you possibly can, as long as you can keep the tempo pretty consistent. You're not trying to bounce out of the bottom and the form looks the same. Lift it, and you can still hit your sets and reps. Lift as heavy as possible.
100%.
But it will be defined by those things first. It might feel that you're not making much progress, but then I was like, have a look at how much muscle mass you've built on your lower body. And she's like, oh yeah. And I was like, you haven't really progressed the weight as fast as you want to, but you're getting the outcome that you want, yeah?
Yeah.
You want to build more muscle mass on your lower body and also then not be injured, yeah? Because you see there's people that rush in and out of the bottom position.
Well,
Progressively overload, hurt my shoulder on the bench press though. What's it for then?
And that's something else that I often have to remind my clients of, is when I'm explaining how we would train if we're trying to prioritize building muscle. And the vast majority of my clients, their number one goal is to build muscle.
Yeah.
They want to get stronger, they want to do other things, but when I say which one's most important, they say build muscle. And oftentimes I'm like, but your training isn't reflecting that. Yeah. Because we know that you need to be training like this to do that, yet you're still lifting too heavy, hurting your shoulder, doing X, Y, and Z, and bouncing and cutting the range of motion short. And oftentimes I have to have that conversation so many times where, and that excuse, and like realistically it's ego because they want to be lifting heavier, right?
Yeah.
But because I'm like, if you look at what you're trying to achieve, you're not training in a way that's going to achieve it. So it's like, there must be a reason that you're doing this. And the excuse is often, oh, but I need progressive overload. It's like when we have that conversation about progressive overload, it's like, well, why are we still doing it? It's like, because it's ego.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And that's because and that's why, this is a bit of a tangent, but that's why I like training people to do 1RMs, because I have never seen someone train harder than when they're getting close to lifting their first 100 kilo bench press.
Yeah.
Like, for 1 rep.
Yeah.
And they'll do all of the right things that they need to do. So it's like, well, how do I need to do it? Well, we probably need to build more muscle. Okay, so how do I do that?
Yeah.
And very quickly people start doing all of the right things for building muscle, if that as their primary goal, even when they're training for the secondary goal, which is like, a bit of fun.
Yeah.
Let's do some 1RMs, which is really good. And I find that is like, so leveraging that kind of ego and that motivation sometimes is fantastic.
Yeah.
It's like, fuck yeah, we want to be strong. We want to lift this. I want to get the video of me lifting 100 kilos and I want to put it on Instagram. That's great.
Excellent. And that's really important. I had that same client ask me this morning about should I do like a 1RM? And I was like, yeah, I would encourage it at a point because the performance goals are sick. Like, it's cool to lift 100 kilos and deadlift a bench press or whatever it might be, but also know that you won't get there until you tick all those boxes. Like you said, it's not going to happen by accident. It was the same client that asked me, I've got to really think about my form and technique every time I do it. Yes. It's always going to happen like that. There's never going to be a point where you build a large amount of muscle mass or lift a heavy weight that you haven't been really conscious in the whole process.
Yeah.
Like when you benched 140, you probably weren't just fucking around.
Did it for a laugh.
Yeah. Which was a bit of a laugh after because yeah. But it never, if those things aren't standardized, the results are not going to come.
100%. And just going back to that point of like how performance goals seem to instill that in a client's mentality. Yeah. It just seems to seems to set things like just straight away, as opposed to, I think when you're just training for body composition, it can be really easy to miss those things because you don't necessarily see the importance of, like, if we're just talking about, let's say 1RMs, the importance of technique becomes so apparent so fast. And when there's aspects of, if you've created standards for that lift, so bar needs to touch your chest, right? Well, if you're just training for hypertrophy, it can be really tempting to not bring your dumbbells all the way down when you're doing your dumbbell variations because, well, whatever, who cares? But when you've been exposed to, I want to do a 100 kilo bench press, you do a full range bench press for the first time and you realize you've got no strength at the bottom, all of a sudden people are going to start working in that position. And you start to see people being so much more methodical about the way that they train. So I think if, like, early on, it's pretty good to start kind of layering those in addition to, I think actually probably more importantly, when performance goals start becoming important is later on, when you've kind of maxed out your newbie gains a bit, you've been training for a while, you're at the point where like you're probably not going to make huge differences to like the way you look like moving forward. I think at that point performance goals and mastery goals start becoming really important. Because it gives you something else to focus on aside from just the simple, like, do I look a certain way? Because that's one, it starts to slow down, but also it gets a bit boring.
Yeah.
Like to just be like doing that as being your focus every single day. Like, for example, like with your squats, it's like, you can start fine tuning things and start, getting like really interested in it beyond just what it's going to do for you. You can start enjoying the thing itself.
Yeah.
Like, how can you make your deadlift better? Watch the video. Okay, well, actually I'm moving here and I don't want to be doing that. And that process starts to be really fun and enjoyable. And when it starts to become really fun and enjoyable, you start training harder, you start training more efficiently because you're getting better. And all of a sudden you start getting more of the results you were looking for in the first place anyway. So it's like, it's a way of leveling up without even trying. And it creates a more interesting approach that's way more sustainable in the long term. And I think that is also an important mindset shift when you get to the later years of your training.
Yeah. And that's why, like, we've talked about a lot in the past, like technically speaking, those big barbell lifts or those performance goals on that, compound lifts are not the most efficient to build muscle mass. But if someone gets engaged in that process and, if someone's never, their max bench is 80 kilos and you get them to a 100 kilo bench press, they have built some muscle mass in that time because they're going to have done their old 1RM for 8 reps at least. That's in the perfect muscle building zone. So they're going to have built some muscle in that time. Yeah. It might not be, but it's just, they on one sort of, you could look at it from a perspective of barbell lifts can be then boring as well too, but the pursuit of chasing the number then makes it more engaging. Because then if you just look at just normal bodybuilding exercises, what are you chasing there other than just that aesthetic goal?
Come on, I want a 45 kilo seated cable chest press at 30 degrees.
Very good for the upper pec fibers.
Yeah. But we talk about, I would apply that same logic of like, I gave the example of the 100 kilo bench press because do you know how many times I've interacted with that with a client?
Yeah.
If it's a guy, I want a 100 kilo bench press.
Yeah.
I want a 140 kilo deadlift. and I might have to push them to set a goal for squats, right? But those are the benchmark standards for someone who's like kind of new, sniffing about the gym a bit, and they see someone, they go, I want to do that.
Yeah.
I've never ever had a client set a performance goal, which is like, unless it's, we're talking about conditioning or something like that, that's in any other context. It's only ever been barbell lifts. There might be slightly influenced by the fact that I do them and enjoy them, and if they're training with me, then they've seen that.
Yeah.
But like realistically, how else can you standardize something that is comparable to what you see other people doing? So, you like, well, I've seen this person do that. That's really cool. I would like to give that a crack. It's like, like I'll leverage the fact that they're overused.
Yeah.
And that they're like, there's absolutely nothing special about them, but they're here to stay. So get used to it. Right. Like I think like, I love the fact that that's what they are. Like they're just, someone got a bar and someone said, we're going to lift them in these 3 ways. And it's just stuck around and it's going to. I think that's great.
Yeah, and you can get really excited about them, like going to the powerlifting competition and seeing how excited people get for squat, bench, and dead. I definitely won't ever get that excited about the bench and deadlift, but definitely the squat.
Yeah.
Deadlift can go and fucking go away. It's shit exercise. So in terms of training, that's where you get your clients to focus on. Nutrition is obviously a big part of that in terms of actually getting the body composition result. What's your process when you're looking at diet with clients?
I've slightly changed my approach, really. I think I take a far more laid back approach to it now. And this is probably due to a change in what I'm trying to, like what my clients want to achieve now, or what I'm kind of like pushing them to do. And I guess like pushing them is the key word there. So I think for a decent amount of time, a good example of a good result for me was like a mad transformation. So getting someone as lean as possible. Whereas now that's only a client's goal if that's what they tell me they want to do. And I have a handful of clients who want to kind of do that. But before, I think because it was, and like reflecting on it, it was potentially even selfish from my view, because for me to like, generate business, the best thing that you can do is get mad transformation like before and afters. And don't get me wrong, everyone wants to do them, but I think oftentimes people say they want to do them. They come in, they see the reality of it, and they're like, I'm actually not entirely sure whether this is like for me. They don't say that, but often that's what I'm seeing. It's like, this might not have actually been for you. Or there's other ways of getting what you were looking for without actually doing this. So in terms of like the diet side of things, getting that result is it's much more driven by the client. And in those cases, it goes back to educating them on the principles. So they've gone through their first kind of phase of training with me, where we learn how everything works from training and nutrition. So understanding their energy balance, what protein's doing, what carbohydrates are doing, what fat's doing, how that's going to work with their training in their body composition. And it's just simply a case of like applying that. But I think I push people a lot less now. I think that's probably like the biggest change that I've made is like, if people, I'm not pushing someone to do their macros and their MyFitnessPal every week now. It's much more self-motivated in that way. And because if they're not doing it, I then just have a conversation about that. It's just so sweet. Well, like initially we said that we were going to work towards this. That hasn't been happening. It's like, why do you think that is? And oftentimes it's like, well, actually I set this goal, but really the goal was that. That doesn't really answer your question. But in terms of like the nutrition for me, like the actual approach that I take generally with my clients now is much more a case of getting them to tick the very basic boxes of what they need for their kind of performance goals and their like muscle building goals, or to progress in the gym. And then if we want to fine tune it towards like muscle gain, like weight gain or weight loss, it's like, sweet, here's what you would need to do. And I kind of let them then go about that with a far more kind of zoomed out approach. And I let them kind of come to me with the questions as to, okay, sweet, well, what should we do next from here? I'd say that's like pretty much how I do it now, because a lot of the time, if a client's goal is to slowly over time get bigger, stronger, maybe leaner, like we talked about earlier, it's pretty much just a case of making sure that they're doing a few things for a long period of time, as opposed to doing lots of things right now. It's like, and I think that's probably the key thing. So I'm just making sure that they're eating a sufficient and appropriate amount of calories to support they're training and what they're looking to get, whether it be build muscle or lose fat. Make sure they're eating at sensible times and they're splitting their meals around sensibly throughout the day, making sure they're not eating complete shit all of the time, not taking a piss with the kind of if it fits your macros or whatever. And then, if they want to fine tune that towards a specific outcome, looking to implement a strategy kind of based on that.
Yeah. But that's it though. Like you said, the principles are there. And once you understand those key things, like understand energy balance, understand what proteins are, understand why you shouldn't be scared of carbs, understand how that's going to help your training, understand fats as well too, then it's like there's obviously, again, more complexities in it, but for the average person, if they understand those, 4 key concepts, and then if you want to get bigger or leaner, go up or down a little bit and just do it sensibly, that gives so many people so much more power to actually go and do life and go out for a meal and not stress about going out for a meal.
100%.
Because then you can control those things.
Yeah, and I think like more to my point before, like what I actually end up doing from a nutritional approach is like, hey, here's the really simple things that you need to do. Learn about them. Here's how we need to apply them. And then what I actually end up doing is helping them apply the really simple things in terms of like or overcoming the obstacles that make it harder for them to apply that. That's pretty much where I come in then. In terms of like for like driving that result, it's where they look from advice like from me is our plan was to do this. I've had this thing come up. How can I still go about getting this thing? And then that's what we end up working on. It's a far more zoomed out kind of like approach as to like, you need to eat this specific amount of thing at this time. And like, and kind of be more regimented in that way. It's like you push as hard as you want to push, knowing these principles.
Yeah.
That you now know what you need to do to get the result. You go as hard as you see fit. Obviously, I'm going to kick you up the arse if you said you want to do this and you're not doing it. I'm going to give you a bit of a shove if you're that type of person. But it's more a case of like when educate on the principles, and then we will then work together on applying it and overcoming any issues that you have along the way and adjusting the approach as needs be, kind of along that process.
And a big thing you said there is educate you on the principles, because
100%.
The more knowledge someone has around it, it takes away all the fear that someone could have around diet as well too, because then you can go out, like obviously it can go down too far, but you can go out and you can go for meals and you can do your meal prep and you can control it. I think oftentimes people, because there's so much shit out there with shouldn't eat this food, you should eat that food, you should do this, whatever it might be, people end up like, it's the same with training, people end up kind of, what's the paralysis by analysis? Like, I don't know, there's so much stuff out there, what actually works? Well, if you actually look at the 4 or 5 things that actually work, there's not that many things that you actually need to stress about then. If you know proteins, calories are calories, you know what decent, good form in the gym is, and then you know how to execute on that, then anybody can have the result that they want for the most part.
100%. Yeah, and I think that's where we come in so much, where I think a lot of, and I guess I would say I don't want to use other people as an example, I'm going to use myself as an example. I was certainly, like before, I would have prided myself on like my deep level of understanding of this. If I was going to try and make some marketing or whatever, I would be wanting to show off how much I knew and my special method or system, or like that would be the thing that I would say was going to set me from the rest, right? Whereas like now it's so the opposite, that I'm like, no, it's so fucking simple. I'm not saying it's easy or you're going to have an easy time like applying it, but it's actually so simple that almost anyone can do it. You just might need a little bit of guidance in actually applying that. Yeah. But isn't that fantastic? Like, isn't that great? Yeah. It's actually not complicated. And although, we've done a lot of education and we know intricate detail in, how all of these things work, it's like the level that you end up actually needing to apply that for the most part is, barely any of it. It's absolutely fantastic to have all of that there. But I think it's really easy for like people like for ourselves and also clients to go down rabbit holes of like kind of seeking out special methods and, all the science behind it. But at the end of the day, it is like, there's a few principles that if you stick to for a long time, you're probably going to be all right.
Yeah. There was something else I was going to say there. But you're right in that it's not the actual things are simple. It's the accountability and sticking to it for the longer period of time is harder. But I guess like a lot of what we do is try to help people, one, stack up the knowledge and education to know that you can control the things that you need to control. And the more knowledge you have around it, the more power you have to change it. And then stack up the habits and routines to be able to turn up to the gym regardless, for the most part, like get your sessions in per week. Because like, what would you say would be the kind of minimum for you for a client to get into the gym per week to actually see or maintain results?
I mean, obviously it massively depends on their level of experience. Like if someone is not training at all and they train once per week, the difference between what that person who trains no times a week to compared to 1 time a week for a long time, if you do that for long enough, there's going to be a decent, difference there, right? Because that person is exposing themselves to either no training or, a lot of training over a long enough period of time.
They get some effective reps in there, mate. They'll
100%
build all the muscle mass.
Obviously, but realistically, 1, hour-long session per week is probably not going to be quite enough. But I'd say 2 times a week, if you're just getting started, is absolutely enough for most people if they train efficiently to get decent results, at least for their first few months of training. Like from going from nothing to something. If you do that, that's absolutely fantastic. I'd almost encourage you to not do more than that, because I'd like you to see you can get progress on a smaller amount. And it also, it reduces the risk of you overcommitting. But the most important thing, kind of going back to that first point, is that it arms you with that knowledge that you've experienced progress at that smaller amount of training. So when you do decide to go up to more, it's not going to feel too bad to go down, because you go, well, I've made progress on this. If you've only ever done 5 or 6 days a week, halving that's going to feel hard and potentially even pointless. And that's where I think so many people struggle, is they think like there can be such a big relative change in their commitments to training and nutrition or whatever, that going down from 5-6 days a week and a regimented nutrition plan to a couple of days a week and just focusing on eating enough protein, that feels like they're not doing anything at all, but it's more than enough.
Yeah.
But if you've made progress on that before, then it's like, sweet, we're just back here for a bit.
Yeah.
I think that, so a lot less than people think.
Yeah. True. And then focus on the things when you come into the gym, execute on, like you said, making that training time efficient and meaningful will make a big difference. While we're on the topic there of training, mate, one of the things that you might have seen, I don't know if I spoke to you about it, but the top 10 exercises. No, I have spoke to you about it. What's Rob Knee's top 10 exercises and why?
Bicep curls.
Bicep curls. Very good exercise.
Yeah. Well, so to go back to what we've talked about, to give you my genuine answer to this question, it wouldn't be any particular exercise. It would be we'd look at what we're actually trying to achieve. Yeah. So it's like, okay, well, I guess it would probably go closer towards movement patterns. So it's like, sweet, what everyone needs to be moving through their squat, their hinge, or that's boring, everyone knows that. But it would be the most important thing for me to answer as a question to that, and how I would express that to a client would be, there is no exercise that is really good. You need to probably move yourself through a squat, through a hinge, and through a press at a few different angles. Which one of those works best for you? Then that's your best exercise. Yeah. Right? But to answer the question in a more fun way,
it's meant to be fun.
Yeah. It's going to be
that was a shit answer.
It's going to be a barbell deadlift. Yep. For sure. It's going to be it's probably going to have to, obviously it's going to be a bench press. So we got a barbell deadlift, bench press, barbell back squat for sure, chin up.
Yeah.
Dips. To me, they're your mandatories. I don't think there's anything else that I think that people have to do.
Chest supported row.
Dumbbell chest supported row.
I would probably go the alternating row now. I'm getting a little bit down that PRR rabbit hole.
Nerd.
But chest supported row.
I'd also just like to state, so that really does not represent my thoughts at all.
In terms of
like what I think people should actually do in the gym. But like for me, if I could never do any, like if you were like, you have to pick 10, that's probably what I'm going to be doing.
Yeah.
I'm going to be doing a barbell squat of some description. I'm going to be doing a barbell deadlift of some description.
Yeah.
Bench press, a chin up, probably dips and a row.
Yeah.
Mad.
That's it.
I would happily only do that forever.
Yeah, fair.
Like I'm confident that I could maintain fantastic and make fantastic results using only those exercises.
Oh, absolutely. But like you say, you're totally right with the movement patterns, because like all of those exercises are movement. You know, we could categorize those into movement patterns, and I think of exercise like on like a spectrum. In that the same thing that you do on like on a kettlebell deadlift is very much the same at a barbell deadlift in terms of movement pattern, but it's just how you progress someone to that. And if you were to take someone from, you know, their very entry level movement patterns up to those exercises and put some serious weight on that, that's what people would get the best results on for the most part if they enjoyed the process.
Yeah, 100%. And the thing is, it's like those 5 or 6 exercises I just gave would also be someone's worst exercises ever.
Yeah,
in order to build muscle or whatever.
Yeah,
like based on their skill and their proportions and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's whatever suits you best. And it's funny because I actually sit like on both sides of it. Like as we discussed earlier, I love like performance goals, barbell lifts. I just think it's sick. I just think it's fun. And for all the reasons we discussed, I think people just train way harder when they're, you know, gunning for those outcomes. But I also love a little bit here and there of nerding out on like on the really good machines and stuff.
Yeah.
So like, you know, you trained with Dave at Prime the other week, and like when you feel like it does feel pretty good to set yourself up in like, you know, the optimal way.
Mate, I did the chest supported row. It was the one, I don't know, but I picked it up and it had the weight that he was doing on there. Just went to lift it. I was like, I can't fucking move that. And then he's like, no, give it a shot because it's just really heavy in the bottom.
The length, yeah.
And then like I pulled it and I was like, it feels like it weighs a ton there, and then nothing at the top. But it was pretty cool to see the big difference that it can.
If you set yourself up on the machines right, it is close to perfect to your like the resistance and the strength profile.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And you can go so much. What failure feels like on, and this is where like you can argue like that it's better than barbell lifts, is because if anyone's ever failed a barbell bench press or a squat, it feels like you're moving it and then it instantly stops. Whereas on these machines, you can adjust them to the point where your last rep can be like 6-7 seconds. It slows down here, but then it gets easier, so then it just continues to be slower and slower.
Yeah, and then you might be able to try another one after that.
That's right. So I guess like going back to the principles thing, it's like, well, actually, there is a potentially a better way to train. But then going back to the enjoyment and the motivation side of things, is like, but are you going to bust your ass on that as hard as you would on a barbell lift? I reckon after seeing it for a fair few years, I reckon people are going to go harder on the lifts that they actually are excited about rather than the perfect one.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's also, like for me, the big thing that comes back for me is, I think just the barrier to entry of, if you can barbell lift, you're always going to have less barriers to entry than if you have like a machine. And something we've talked about a lot before, like if, you know, I think there's absolutely better exercise out there for building muscle mass than a barbell bench press, a deadlift or RDL or whatever it might be, or squat. But then it's like, if you're just waiting to set up on that piece of equipment because there's 2 or 3 people waiting for it, it's just a fucking pain in the ass. And I'd rather get on the exercise that is actually more enjoyable, because it was cool to use. And then with the Prime machines, but like, you know, they've got one of everything. So obviously that gym's not super busy, but then if you are waiting for it, I'd rather just bang out some chest supported row. And I think maximizing the simple tools for the most part is going to be more efficient on average.
Yeah, 100%. And also like, you want to rely on the least amount of things.
Yeah.
Like if you can simplify everything, and it goes back to like the approach we take with like making things easier for clients. It's like, well, you know, don't overcommit to this. Don't make your training program need such specific bits of equipment. It's like, at the end of the day, let's say we're trying to grow your lats. You just need to deliver a stimulus to your lats. That's what your training on your back day is supposed to do.
Yeah.
So it's like, you don't want to put too many barriers in the way of that. And there's so many ways that you can achieve that with just a dumbbell or a barbell, right? So it's like, I don't know, if it's that type of approach where you're trying to be super specific and accurate is applicable a very small amount of the time. For the most part, it's like, let's just crack on, because as we know, we work in busy gyms. And for the most part, you just need to be able to like make it work with what you've got in front of you.
Yeah, get a decent stimulus in within the hour or whatever you've got. For some people, not even that.
Yeah.
And not even that many times a week that the setup is actually worth it. And so just executing like big basic exercises and those movement patterns really, really well, you'll go pretty decent. I kind of sometimes get sick of programming, like I'm like, think of a row variation and then chest support a row.
Yeah.
Because like the amount, I change it quite a lot with like, I'll put like a seated row in for a client, and then the amount of times that the seated row is taken, and I'm like, just jump back on the chest support row.
Perfect. There's always going to be a bench for you.
Chest support row, incline press, one of the greatest supersets you can do.
I had an interesting conversation with a client the other day who was just signing up, and he had mentioned in his form, he was like, the thing I'm looking for the most and like would like your help with is making sure that I've got like variety in my training on a relatively consistent basis. So I pulled him up on that, because I was like, this is something you're going to probably need to remind me on, because I would use the same program almost indefinitely, because I'm a bit of a robot with that type of thing, providing that it was going to get me the outcome. I was like, I'll change when I need to change, but if it doesn't need to, I'd rather go in, not really think about it, get the work done, move on. We ended up having an interesting conversation. I was like, tell me a bit more about like kind of needing to change it. It was like every 4 weeks or so. And it came down to the fact that he was saying it was not necessarily that he gets bored, it's that he stops finding them effective or like kind of seeing results from it. So the first few weeks get really sore, progressing weight loads, and then kind of hits like a wall at 4 weeks or so. And then it's like, sweet, it's time to move on to the next one. And like, essentially we ended up having the conversation was like, I think you're basically changing exercises when it starts becoming effective, right? Like in terms of like, you haven't done barbell bench press in 3 to 6 months. You're going to start doing it. You're going to be crap at it. You're going to be shaking all over the place, and it's going to be a new stimulus or position, of loading to the body, and you're going to get really sore. Over time, you're going to become more efficient at it. You're going to learn the skill or relearn the skill again. And then you're going to stop seeing all of this progress, and you're not going to be sore. That's great. That's when you're now actually able to start creating an adaptation, because your body's not going to be worrying about like this bar not falling on your face, right? It's like, so like when we had that discussion of like, that's actually when your window of opportunity opens for you to start progressing off that. It was like, oh, well, I probably don't need so much variation as I think. And the point of that was, I think the simple things, once you start seeing progress with them, become much more exciting anyway, that you don't need so much fancy stuff in your training. It's like, most people are training for results. And once you start seeing them, it's like, oh, this is way more fun anyway. Like it does, like I don't need to do it. Like why do another variation when this one's working?
Yeah.
And then, just adding variation more so for the sake of like your general movement variation. So you're not like actually neglecting that is something that comes in more. But for the most part, like there's nothing wrong with like programming that chest supported row for the 4th program in a row, providing that they're not hating it, it's still working and we're still improving. It's like, well, unless you're sick of this and you want to move on, it can stay in.
Yeah.
And that's something like a conversation I often have with clients too, is like, I ask them that, I'm like, do you want any of this to change? Because oftentimes it's like, I generally will change your program depending on the client for 8 or 12 weeks, maybe little bits here and there. But oftentimes I'm like, if you don't want to change any of this stuff, most of this doesn't need to change, because oftentimes they're like, oh, well, it's 12 weeks is up, we need to change. But oftentimes it's like, well, I'm just doing that more so for you than anything else. But if you're happy to keep moving, let's go. Yeah. Because, if you're in a good spot with this, we can keep that. Also, it makes my life way easier because I don't need to bother changing your program, which is fantastic. But
efficient.
That's my excuse anyway.
But also, like that's the thing. Like when we pick exercises, our goal is like we'll always pick the exercise that we see at the time that is going to be most efficient. Yeah. Why would we pick anything else?
Yeah.
Like I'm never going to pick the reason why I pick a chest support row, because I think it's probably one of the most, all things taken into account, the most efficient exercise that you can probably do for your upper back. You're always going to be able to do it. You get up to doing 40 kilo dumbbells on it, you're going to have a big back.
100%.
If you persisted with it for that period of time, it's worked, you know.
Yeah.
And there is subtle variations that you can pick with it. But, you know, like I think, because obviously we look at exercise as movement patterns, not necessarily an exercise.
Yeah.
So, you know, when I'm picking a squat for someone, I don't just go barbell back squat, because that's what I like doing. I'm going squat. Okay, well, what's the best squat for them? Probably a goblet squat.
Yeah.
Cool. Can you get a good stimulus out of that? Can you take it through the full range of motion? Can you maintain a nice stable brace? Excellent. Cool. Is that good enough squat? Do that. And then once they can't do that, then you move on to if they progress past that, then we will move on to another exercise. But, you know, I think when our body doesn't, I think people think that our body perceives an exercise and gives it like a thumbs up of, this is a cool exercise. But our body just perceives a task and it gets that task done, yeah. So whether that's a goblet squat, chest support row, a seated row, whatever it might be, it's still doing the same thing. There's a task, there's going to be tension, it'll adapt to that and then gets them the results, yeah. And so that's like the overarching principles. It's no different with changing nutrition. Once you understand that, yeah, you'll just change macros a little bit, up and down, calories in, calories out. It's the same with our body, what our body perceives as training, right?
Yeah. And that's why it's hard to answer the question. It's like, what's the 10 best exercises? It's like, I haven't looked at it in that way for so long, because it's like the same exercise that's absolutely fantastic for us to meet the criteria of what we're looking for in a squat movement.
Yeah.
It's going to be, like, let's say a barbell back squat is going to be amazing for some people, absolutely terrible. And like, you know, tick all of the boxes that we don't want to tick for another person.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like the exercise itself is so irrelevant. It's it's the impact that it has on the person and what it gets them to do in terms of their movement and their position. It's actually what is important.
Yeah, but if you had to pick a top 10, pick Rob's 5.
Yeah, pretty much. Oh yeah, and then like I think I forgot arms in that. Actually.
We said bicep curls first, so.
Yeah, so it would be, I think it would have to be, skull crushers for sure for triceps.
With a barbell, straight barbell.
Nah, dumbbells. So my elbows have absolutely none of that. I've never, ever been able to do it. Not even with an easy bar. It feels horrendous.
It's on the boss list if you can do
straight if your elbows are up for it, crack on, because it is the most gangster of all. But my
Mike does it, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think so. My elbows have never, ever been able to tolerate that. So for me, dumbbell, skull crusher, easy bar, bicep curl, I think. You just get the weight going on that.
Yeah.
You always look jacked in the mirror when you're doing an easy bar bicep curl. So that's also a pretty significant influence on what exercises that you should be doing as well. It's like which ones look the best. I think Luciano mentioned this as well, like
the dips,
100%. Like that matters a lot.
Absolutely. Especially when he's got his kid off in the gym doing it.
Like, and that's another thing is like it's similar to like the performance goal with a bench. It's like if you just love doing that exercise, like that's so important.
Yeah,
it was like when you're doing your bicep goals, you're like, this looks great. Yeah. It's like that's one that you should be doing.
Yeah, and well, that's the thing at the end of the day, because none of it really matters. So we need to make it matter out of the things that don't kind of matter.
Yeah.
You know, there's so much nuance to training and the things that you can pick, and you know, you can get the perfect machine. And like, I love geeking out on it as well. Like, how can you make that better? I look at it, you know, my viewpoint from it has come from like a rehab standpoint of like fixing this, fixing that. How can we make that better? And then also doing that from a, you know, from a longevity standpoint, if you can make an exercise fit someone and feel better, whatever that might be, that person will be able to do it for a longer period of time, and then that be a better exercise.
Yeah.
But yeah, just enjoying an exercise is a lot to be said for that. I've gone through periods where I'm like, I want to, you know, do different machines for lower body, and then I hate them, so I just continue to squat.
Yeah.
Serves me well.
Yeah.
You know, the more complex it is, even just the complexity, it's not even that complex, but if I just have to wait for a machine, I will just go do something else.
Yeah. I think, and what's funny as well as you said there, is like none of it matters. It's like it does matter, but before there's so many other things that people aren't doing that are more important and have a much higher ROI than like the different type of exercise that you're doing, or what time you've eaten X, or how many grams specifically of protein that you're going to eat. Like the things that, like, what type of creatine should you be taking? You know, like things that the things.
What type of tren?
Yeah, well, that's a different story. It's all of it. The things that matter the most are the things that, like, is doing the principles on a consistent basis, and it's like most people aren't doing that. Like for myself, I would probably consider myself a somewhat advanced lifter. Let's say advanced relative to the general population.
Yeah.
Do you know how I could improve my results? Well, I think I only slept about 5.5, maybe 6 hours last night. I think I forgot to eat at one point in the day yesterday. I was working quite a lot.
Yeah.
And I do a lot of things right. Like I do a lot more right than many of my clients.
Yeah.
And even for someone like myself who's been doing it a long time, it's like my lowest hanging fruit is like more consistency of the super basic stuff. And I almost don't know anyone who that doesn't apply to.
Yeah.
And it's like we can still have fun and geek out and nerd out on if someone's really interested in it, it's not a bad thing. But the thing I don't like the most is when people put too much significance and importance on things that have such a small impact in the grand scheme of things. I mean, that's probably like a really good way of summarizing like what we were talking about earlier. Because there's not many people I know who need more complicated stuff. They just need to do the simple stuff better.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the classic like new shiny thing. Oh, this over here, that's whatever it is. But
and that's cool.
Yeah.
Because it can be really helpful to keep things interesting, but just know that it's probably not going to make that much of a difference in comparison to some, like, getting an extra hour of sleep every single night. That's a performance enhancing drug in comparison to, the type of chest press you're doing.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah, because again, body just perceives it as a task and it will get that task done. And like at the end of the day, if someone wants to build muscle mass, your goal is to focus on generating tension. Yeah. And actually that was one thing that, you said on your post the other day, and I wonder if it was sparked by the conversation you have with your client with the exercise variation. And like you said, with the, if you do a bench press and you haven't done it for 6 months and it's all wobbly, those are all things that are limiting you to produce force. And if you can't produce force, you're not creating tension. If you're not creating large amounts of tension, you're not building muscle mass.
Yeah.
So the more you change that exercise around, and I think it's really a key thing to have some staple exercises, whatever that may be, that you continually keep in there, although it might be changing an angle slightly or something like that. But if you can't produce force on an exercise, you're probably not going to build much muscle, or any really.
Yeah.
Most of the time is going to be spent learning to coordinate that exercise.
Exactly. Yeah. So like for context, my post was I was encouraging people to pick a handful of exercises for like each movement pattern or muscle group that they really, really enjoy, and just focus on getting really good at it over a long period of time. And the reason for that is, as we discussed, if you're constantly learning the skill or relearning a new skill of your exercises that you keep changing, your body is not going to be able to produce the most amount of force on there because it's going to sense instability and novelty, and it will limit that based on that. So it's really important that people keep some consistency until you get to a relatively advanced level where you can pretty much jump into the gym and get yourself a decent set on most exercises. But for the vast majority of people, you're going to need to keep things relatively consistent if you want to get if you want your training to be efficient. It's really cool at the moment to have the opposite opinion, I think.
Like a movement redundancy.
Yeah. So like almost like we were, I guess we were kind of touching on it there. We're saying, well, it doesn't really matter. You're just trying to get a stimulus. And a lot of people would argue, well, it doesn't matter. You could just do a different movement every single week. And it's kind of true, but I'd say you are limiting your progress a decent amount if you're like in that intermediate category. If you're a beginner, you can probably get away with changing your exercises every single week. As long as you're moving relatively well with sufficient intensity, you're going to do enough to generate a decent amount of a stimulus to build muscle.
But how are you a person that wants to change their exercise every single week?
I know, it's almost like a pointless argument anyway.
Imagine being in that person's head. I need to change my exercise every single week.
And yeah, Like, I think if that's you, you don't like training that much.
No.
So therefore, just don't worry about it.
Yeah. Because that is the thing as well, too, at the end of the day, to get a good result, it's replicating the same thing over and over again for a long period of time, as we've said many times. You know, I had that conversation with my client saying, you know, when will I not have to think about the squat when I always have to think about it so much. I'm like, yes, that's going to happen. And the heavier it gets, you're going to have to think about maybe not the same sort of cue, but it's going to be a conscious fucking effort every single time.
Yeah.
When you deadlifted 250, did you just throw everything out the window and be like, I'm going to hope for this to... There's probably a little bit of hoping for it to come up.
A little bit, yeah.
But you probably just did the same things with more and more effort than that you've already done in the lead up until that, yeah?
Yeah, 100%.
It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to try it one day.
Yeah. Repetition over time.
Yeah.
But that's also like why... But two things that have come to mind there. It's like, that's also why I think making it become a hobby is important. So looking at it as more as like, you're not just doing it for the outcome. You're doing it because it's something that you want to do and enjoy. And I think, you know, setting performance goals and trying to look at it as something that you're trying to get really good at and master the act of doing it. So like, I want to be really good at training and all of the exercises that I do. I think that's an important perspective to have on it, because I think it takes you away from just simply looking at the outcome, because that does, like, the outcomes slow down over time. But also, you're going to have to be doing a lot of the same things for quite a long period of time. So it's probably important that you enjoy it, or at least you work towards enjoying it and making that an element of it too. But the other thing is, that's also why it's important to not overcommit, because it's exciting at first, but it probably will become less exciting. So you want to commit to an amount that you can do for a decent period of time, relatively consistently, because you're going to have to do quite a lot of the same things over and over again. And you don't want to be kind of overcommitting at the start to that, because that's going to make that kind of journey quite difficult if you've kind of overcommitted to what's realistic for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Because it's a long game, yeah. And that will get you the good result. On that, this is kind of like in the top 10. What do you think are a couple of things that are overrated when it comes to fitness, and what do you think are a couple of things that are underrated? We've kind of touched on it, I guess, a little bit.
Overrated.
Snatch, grip, deadlift.
Don't get me started on that. I mean, I don't want to kind of keep talking about the same thing too much, but I think like overrated is anyone's particular method. I was actually having a chat with Mel about this before, but like everyone who's assuming that we're talking about like getting stronger and getting in shape, right?
Yeah.
Most people have done the same thing to get there.
Yeah.
But then people get to like, you know, they get the decent results after 5 years or so of training like how everyone else trained, and then they come up with their method. But they didn't do that to get where they were, you know, like, so that's something I think is like most overrated is your fucking method when you didn't use that to get to, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's the thing that annoys me the most.
Yeah, and it's probably steroids as well too.
Well, yeah, but like, do you know what I mean? It's like, oh, this is my approach and it's unique. And it annoys me that people are even, I know it's marketing, but it's like, no, like, it's not your method that got you there. Yeah. It was a really simple stuff you did before, but obviously you can't, that's hard to sell. So then you end up with people saying, no, it's this really specific thing. It's like, well, it probably wasn't.
Yeah.
So I guess that's my number one overrated thing is anyone's method.
Cool. What else? What's underrated? The principles.
Underrated is the principles for sure. Like underrated is actually thinking about why you're doing something.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean? Like, so when a client comes to me and they say, which is better, this or that? For what?
Yeah.
and often that stumps them.
Yeah.
Which is better, this exercise or that exercise? To get what? You know, like head scratch.
Yeah.
And like, you haven't even thought about why you're asking the question.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just, well, there must be a better one. But why? And then, do you know what I mean? So I guess that's probably underrated, is thinking about why you're doing things and why you're applying things and the changes that you're actually trying to make with, you know, specific things. And if we keep it on the context of training, this applies to almost everywhere.
Yeah.
But oftentimes it's like, well, if I do this, it'll be better, right? Well, better for what?
Yeah.
Again, goes back, what are you actually trying to achieve when you do those things? So I think underrated is thinking about what you're actually trying to do, in the gym with whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah, fair. Cool. Knowing what you know now, so I guess this is what your job, if you could just put it into a couple points. Knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself starting out?
Say again, mate.
Knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself starting out, just in a couple of points? Starting out with training.
Yeah. I like from a training standpoint, like what I should do.
Yeah.
I think I'll answer the question in the way that I heard it initially. The advice I'd probably give to myself is that you're never ever going to feel like you've got there.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like that's kind of deep, but like in terms of that's like, I think that's probably what made me not enjoy the process at the start, was trying to be there.
Yeah.
Right. I remember when I first started training, I would have been, and had got some results. I was probably like 17, 18. I used to not want to take my top off in front of people. It wasn't because I thought I was in bad shape. It was because I knew I would be in better shape in 6 months. That's so mental, because again, it wasn't because I was insecure, but it's like, I know I can be better. Like, so you're right. Like, cause and for then when I was training, it was about how I looked. There was nothing, that was why I was doing it.
Yeah.
And I think the best piece of advice is like, when you think about like, you're never ever going to get there. So you might as well enjoy it like now. That would be my own personal advice of me, but I do see that in so many of my clients too. It's like, the grass is always greener on the other side, and it's like, it's not at all. It doesn't really change that much from when you've gone from being out of shape or not in shape to when you start getting into like what most people would consider reasonably good shape, which is, for most people, once you've been training consistently for a few years and you've got 12 to 15% body fat, you've got a bit more muscle than a normal person. It doesn't really get that much better after that. You're just lifting more weights and maybe you're wearing bigger t-shirts.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually change all that much. Like, you don't walk around feeling like, it feels pretty decent if to be in good shape. But like, in terms of, I felt pretty decent when I first started training. That hasn't really changed too much. So yeah, piece of advice for when I first started training is, you're never ever going to get there. So enjoy it now.
And you're never as big as your pump.
Yeah, you might as well keep chasing it. You might as well have a go though.
Otherwise you'll be really fucking sad for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
What's a myth you would like to see busted in the industry, mate?
There's a few that are kind of like close. I've got a few good ones, I'm sure. I'm struggling to think of the one that I'm looking for, but essentially like something along the lines of like, more is better.
Yeah.
In terms of like, like the like the hustle grind motivation kind of thing is like, like put in more because that's better. And I think like the reason that I dislike it is because I think it so often detracts from the main reason that people actually started training.
Mm-hmm.
So most people start training because they wanted to improve their life, their confidence, and whatever it may be. People get sucked into training, and then you, especially if you're a guy, you get pulled into like, maybe it's bodybuilding or like just the general kind of fitness stuff. And it's like, you got to do more. And it ends up being this like mission that you're embarking on to get like as jacked as possible or whatever. And it starts becoming something that potentially even detracts from why you initially went in the first place. So it's like, if you went to the gym to get more confident, feel good with your shirt off, be quite strong, and then allow that to enhance your life, when you start putting more into it, you start detracting from the life part and just start putting in. It's like, is that actually better? I think that's probably something that I'd like to see a little bit less, especially when it comes to the fucking general population.
Yeah.
Obviously for athletes, it's like, you crack on, go nuts.
Yeah.
But for the average person, it's like, no, 3 days a week is pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can't compare yourself to a professional athlete.
Yeah.
That trains 6 hours a day.
Yeah.
It's like when you see, people ask when the best time is to train. I had a client, he went to his doctor and the doctor told him that, he's XYZ chronotype, and he should be training at this time of the day. And I was like, excellent. You run your own business. You can't be in the gym then. So that's pointless information.
Yeah.
Come in at 6 a.m. when we've got your session booked anyway.
Yeah, I'll see you at 6.
Yeah, irrelevant. I think that's one thing that I would like, people just kind of majoring in the minors of the things that don't actually get any result, like the training at the perfect time, eating at the perfect time.
100%.
You know, those things like that are just completely irrelevant. And I guess that's like you said, you know, how people will come up with a method that's going to get someone in shape, but that method didn't get them in shape. They tracked their macros, trained 4 to 5 times a week, and probably did some steps.
Yeah, they trained relatively hard, somewhat consistently. They ate roughly the right amount of calories and protein for a few years. That's what they did. But it was their method.
We've just busted the whole industry wide open. And that's a thing at the end of the day. Like, that's so accessible for a lot of people. I don't know. It is a frustrating thing that there's like secrets with it, as in like there's a method that someone must be doing to get them the results.
Yeah. Well, it's like I've had a conversation with a client before when he was relatively consistently sending me stuff on Instagram or social media posts going, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? What do you think of this? And it'd be some like hyper-specific protocol, product, workout, exercise. And for the first few, I would reply to them saying, here's what I think about that. I think it's a good, bad, or whatever it may be, my thoughts on it. And afterwards, after 3 or 4, I replied back. I was like, "Stop looking for the thing." Yeah. I was like, I can tell you about what I think about this thing, but stop looking for the thing because it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And I think and that comes from that mindset. Like before, like there's some special thing that's gonna get you the results. It's like no. It's simple stuff.
Yeah. And it's not, I had a client ask me the other day if they, you know, two clients. One asked me they want to get lean and leaner, and then the classic, should we train abs more? No, because it's going to be very inefficient for you to actually burn more energy, and you probably need to be burning more energy and focus on the nutrition. And then another client, I think I did an Instagram post about it, and then another client asked, he's like, I saw your post the other day, said you can't, you know, just train abs to get leaner, but when I get leaner, is there some way to stop it coming off my face, like getting leaner? Because, you know, if you get really lean, you get death face.
Yeah.
He's nowhere near that, but he's like, yeah, is there something that I can do? And I was like, no, like that doesn't exist.
But and that's the thing, right? Like when you come back to the principles of like understanding things, it's like that's where that really would apply.
Yeah.
And then that's, I'm assuming, where you would then input education around the principle. So it's like, well, no, this is actually how fat loss works. And then hopefully we don't ask those questions again, you know?
He does ask those questions quite consistently.
You educating does not mean that it's gone in, but you've tried. And that's what makes you feel better.
That's the thing, and that's why I continue to have a job, because they'll continue to come back and ask me silly questions. And hopefully we're 2 hours in, so that no one's actually probably listening at this point.
2 hours in?
Yeah, nearly 2 hours. It's good fun, hey?
It's good.
Yeah. How much more time you got, mate? What are you learning at the moment?
What am I learning at the moment? I'm learning how to ride bikes better.
It's a noble quest.
Yeah. As a result of that, I'm learning a lot about conditioning.
Yeah.
Finding that really interesting. So for my own performance and some of my clients as well. Starting to get a few people kind of sniff around as well for coaching around training for mountain biking too.
Cool.
Which is motivating for some of that too. So
you're going to get them to do like a toes elevated barbell RDL?
Yeah, like the most specific protocol ever. And it'll be, I'll create a very specific name.
The method.
Of a method that is quite vague, so no one actually has a clue what is in it, but it's intriguing enough that they want to buy it.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing at the moment. So yeah, conditioning, also a little bit of the movement stuff from David Gray.
Oh yeah.
So I'm in his education portal at the moment. I do that somewhat passively because it's set out quite nicely. They're like 15, 20-minute videos that I'll kind of watch when I just got that amount of time. It's often what I'll do if I'm finding myself just on my phone not doing much. I'll be like, you could probably just like, I'm not someone who's like, you need to be super productive at all times, but sometimes like you are literally wasting time now. If I'm on the assault bike, whatever.
Send the boys 20 or 30.
Yeah. Like if I've sent someone 5 reels in a row, I'm like, you could probably actually do something better with this time.
My favourite's when you wake up on a Sunday morning and you've got like 15 reels from Chris.
Yeah.
And the last one was about 30 minutes ago and you know he hasn't been to sleep yet.
Yeah, morning, Chris.
Yeah, that's fair. But we are lucky with what we do. I need to keep reminding myself this, that, it's pretty cool. We like training and that's our job.
Mate, it's unreal.
Yeah.
Like, so I think Matt Duncan talked about it on your podcast before when he said, it was along the lines of someone asking what education they should do. Maybe you asked that.
Yeah.
And his answer was, once you've learnt the fundamentals, it's whatever you want, whatever interests you. And that's what's kept me engaged and will continue to keep me engaged for so long. It's like, cool, I can now make mountain biking relevant to my job because it applies to that. So that's infinitely going to be interesting. So I can learn about conditioning at the nerdiest level, for even if it's not that beneficial to, like direct application, which it will be, but even if it's not, just having that much intrigue and interest in something related to your work and being able to pivot and at any point when that stops becoming interesting to learn about something else, being able to do that forever, I think that is one of the luckiest things about our job and how malleable it is, to be able to change it. And not only that, be able to run your own schedule was also quite cool as well.
Yeah, for sure. Get that work from home on Mondays and Wednesdays, mate, where you sleep in and do fuck all.
Yeah. I don't actually work.
No. I actually did it on Monday. I didn't want to come into the office, so I didn't. And I was like, oh, cool. Do all my work at home. And it was actually quite nice.
It's very nice.
It's very, very nice. That's the thing. Like, there's so many avenues that you can go with health and fitness, and beyond a point, it, like you said, once you understand the principles of things and how to write programs and exercise selection, they're like the little ins and outs, like the little rabbit holes are cool, but they still don't rewrite the whole thing of execute the basics really well with a decent tempo, decent technique, do it, 3 to 5 times a week, depending on the goal. You'll get the result from there. And I think that I guess it's one thing that it's probably a little bit more complex than we give it credit for, though, as well too, because we are really into it. We wouldn't have probably got this far into
and that's something that I think I wanted to pick up earlier when I was like, it does matter.
Yeah.
And I think we're probably unknowingly making so many decisions based off our deeper understanding more often than we think.
Yeah.
But I guess for the communication for the client, it's so important for them to not think that the super specific things are as important. That I think that is the communication around the basics being important is paramount. Like, that's the important thing.
Yeah.
Even though there's so much going on in the background, like from the coaching standpoint, but realistically, like the heavy hitters and the big rocks are always going to be the same.
Yeah. And when I say it doesn't matter, it's like you could be doing any piece of exercise. Like I think it matters a lot. That's literally what I do all the time.
Yeah.
But it's like it also doesn't matter that much as well too, in terms of if someone's just wanting to come into the gym and get in better shape, like the focus on whatever the thing is going to be for the movement pattern and the loading will get someone where they want to go.
Yeah.
And making the process engaging is the meaningful part of it as well too. So like a barbell back squat does not matter, but if that makes the process meaningful for that person, it matters a lot.
100%.
Because that's going to get them to come into the gym a lot more. I guess we've been going for 2 hours now, mate. So it's cool. Time flies by when you're doing it. Hey, where do you want to see the industry go in the next 10 years?
That's a big question.
Where would you like to see it go? Focusing more on methods.
I think selfishly, I'm going to give you my honest answer. I'm not that bothered.
Yeah, fair.
because I can selfishly stay so much in my own lane.
Yeah.
Like I was trying to think of an answer that sounded better.
Yeah.
But that is my answer. I honestly don't care that much because I think we've got so much freedom to make it whatever we want it to be.
Yeah.
That hopefully there's enough people who are doing quote unquote the right thing.
Yeah.
Or what isn't the right thing to them that they enjoy, that it's like, sweet. So like, it doesn't really matter where the industry goes. I'm still fairly sure I'll be able to do my thing and preach and do what, like, you know, my methods and, you know, my approach, that I'm it's not something that I've actually ever thought about, to be honest.
Yeah, fair.
And I don't think it's something that I'm too concerned with.
Fair. The Robney method coming out soon.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, like after a while when, you know, you do decent education and you get understanding of the things that matter the most, there's not much else that can change it from there.
I think people's education around training, fitness, like all of that stuff is just improving anyway.
Yeah.
So I think we're on a pretty good trajectory, which is why when I say I don't care, I do care. But like, I think over time, it's just going to get better and better and better. And the fads that come in and out are going to come in and out. I don't think many of them will stick around.
If people want results, they won't.
Because it's always going to have to come back to the same things.
Yeah.
So it kind of doesn't matter, because the people who are truly seeking results in whatever it may be are always going to have to come back to the same principles. So the direction that the industry goes in is kind of irrelevant.
Yeah.
Because I'm still going to be doing, well, maybe not the same things, because I'm open to change and learning and developing, but providing that we're still basing what we do off principles, wherever the industry is and whatever is cool, popular, in whatever it may be, is somewhat irrelevant, because the people who are seeking results are going to end up at the same place or wherever the best place is for them based on our knowledge and understanding at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and because the human being has not evolved that much differently in the last however many years, whatever's going to work now will work in 10 years' time, it'll work in 20 years' time, maybe in 100 years' time, unless we're... Have you seen the what they expect the human beings to look like in like 100 and something years or whatever, like the adaptations from phones?
I don't know if I want to.
Where they look like a lizard / alien kind of thing.
/ massive nerd.
Yeah, that's where it'll evolve to.
I was actually having that discussion with my client today. I was saying, like I caught myself I went to the post office yesterday, which is like 200 meters up the road. And on the way back, I think I was on my phone the whole time. I'm actually not bad for it.
Yeah.
But I did notice it, and I was like, I looked up and I was like, way nicer up here.
Yeah.
Sky, sunset, like, it was all going on. I was like, yeah, the real world's actually quite good.
Yeah.
But I was only able to catch myself and go, hey, don't do that. That's not good, because I didn't grow up with a phone when I was younger, and when I was on my phone or, you know, PlayStation or whatever, my parents would be like, don't do that, that's bad. Mm-hmm. Here's the reasons why. But like people growing up today are going to have, they've only ever had phones. So it's like, will we have that voice in the back of your head saying, hey, you probably shouldn't be on your phone all day long. And if there is no kind of like limit or filter to that, then I was kind of saying, like, where are we going to end up? And it is going to be that.
Probably, yeah. It's kind of fucking crazy, hey.
It's weird. And microchipped as well. That's deep for this podcast,
yeah.
but
well, mate,
chip me up.
Yeah, are you pro microchip?
Fuck no. No.
Just so you can actually see how fast you go on Strava. If that was
if it made it more accurate, yeah. No, I think it's funny. I had this conversation literally earlier today. All for all the technology to develop outside of body. So watches can go nuts, phones can go crazy, but I don't really want it under the skin.
No.
I think that's probably where I'm going to draw the line.
Yeah.
There's going to have to be, I'm yet to see something that would make me want to do that.
Yeah.
Who knows?
One thing that annoys me is the watches when you're talking to someone and then they'll be like, got a text message.
Unbelievable. That is socially acceptable now.
It's crazy, hey?
Like, what's that, mate? It's, insane.
That's why I got this also. Just because I didn't want anything to be buzzing on my, to distract me on my wrist.
I got this Garmin, and I thought initially, I was like, oh, it's so cool, it can do those things. I think I had it for a month and I was like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because I was having conversations with people and going, oh, hold on. This is right? Like, and I was like, this is a horrible way to be interacting with people. And like the amount of times that this buzzes, whereas if you put your phone on silent, you don't notice half of your notifications, right?
No. That's why people need to ride bikes more. How many times you check your phone when you're riding a bike?
Yeah.
Unless Kate's going to get a video of you.
Well, yeah, obviously clips are very important.
Yeah.
But like, that is why bikes or any sport like that is very good.
Yeah.
I think, good luck being anxious or depressed or worried when you're flying down a hill that quick.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
You'll be stressed sometimes.
Yeah, but it's fun.
Yeah.
But
it's good stress. Use stress.
To talk about mindfulness and being in a moment, I reckon that's a good way.
Oh man, it's as good as it can get. That's the thing with it. Yeah, you can't be. When I've gone out with Mel, I'm like, did you think about work then? She's like, no, I didn't. I was like, that's why we need to do it more.
And for people like, so one of the negatives of what we were talking about earlier, when he's like, you can do whatever you want with your job, you can always be learning. There is always something to do. And for people like ourselves who are motivated to do more and, improve, that can be a hard thing to turn off. And I think, especially when your hobbies are training, which is kind of work, it can be very difficult to switch off. And having something like that, like for me over the last few years, has been literally like life-changing. And my outlook on everything actually has changed from, like, as a result of being able to completely remove myself from the things I interact with on a day-to-day basis, which is like work. So yeah, it's had a profound impact on that, which is cool.
Yeah, and I think it's really, really important for people, if you can have a hobby, something like that. I was talking to, and that's a cool thing to train for as well. Like the ability to, we were talking off air, like, like your skills are really, really good, but they're not as good as like the top 5 in the elite. But that you can try to outwork them and get more power out of you or more conditioning. And that's the cool thing, is just being able to see what the body is capable of. Because, like, again, when I say it doesn't matter, like, you don't need to do physical things in life these days, but there is also a need to be able to just kind of do cool shit and be able to pick stuff up and go for a ride and go for a run if you need to, and just do quote unquote functional stuff.
Yeah.
And
have fun.
Yeah. And training, training will allow you to have more fun.
100%.
Like the amount of more fun you can have on your bike when you are more fit and you can put more into it, that's going to be better. Yeah.
And like, I think one of the questions you were like going to ask was about like being motivated, and like assuming that's around training.
Yeah.
I don't think there's one thing that doesn't improve when you're fitter and stronger.
Yeah.
So like, there's your motivation, right? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, to continue like training and doing things. It's like, there's not one single thing that gets worse when you get fitter and stronger. So the way that you interact with every single other thing in your life therefore improves. It's like, well, there you go. It's a no-brainer. Yeah.
And we get to do it as well. That's like one thing, it's easy to look at riding a bike and you let it be dangerous and you could hurt yourself. But you also get to have that fun to be able to do that.
Yeah.
There'd be so many people that would want to ride a bike that can't because of X, Y, Z, whatever it might be. And the same thing with training as well too. Like, I remind myself quite frequently of like, everybody has a day where you don't want to train because you're tired or whatever it is, or you're just not as motivated, but it's something we've talked about, how a bit of a trend on social media to, I trained and I didn't want to train.
Yeah.
But you always get to train. You always get to, if you can train at a decent level, like, that's a privilege to be able to do that. And it's cool. And the same thing with riding a bike. Yeah. It's dangerous. You could hurt yourself, but also you get to be able to do it.
Yeah, 100%. Like, it's very unlikely that we would have, like, out of your probability of when you were born, that you go and get to do, out of choice, almost anything that you want.
Yeah.
To some extent.
Yeah.
You can kind of go and choose whatever hobby you want. You can even choose what job you have, which is pretty cool in comparison to, like, not even that long ago before.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess, like, it's a good spot to be a bit grateful.
Yeah. Well, we'll finish on that note, mate. Got
Rob's gratitude.
I didn't think they would get there.
Yeah, fuck me.
We started with bikes, finished mostly with bikes and Rob's gratitude. Cool.
All right, thanks for having me.
How are your ears? Mine are fucking boiling.
I feel so weird. I feel like I was talking so loud. I feel like I would have been talking really loud.